estate, you're probably going to have a better appreciation for how important real estate is. Now, I know that I don't need to convince anybody here that real estate is important because you're all paying good money to learn about real estate. You wouldn't pay a lot of money to study about real estate if you thought it's not important, but it's still worth highlighting a few things. So first of all, participation. In terms of participation, here in the United States, we have about 2/3 of the population own real estate. Okay? About right now, it's something like 67% of people in the United States own real estate. Usually it is their own house that they live in many cases, second house, investment property, etc. Now, just so you understand, this 66% or 67%, first of all, it's quite stable over the last few decades. If you look even 40, 35 years back, this number was basically between 63 and 69%. So during the recession, it was a little bit low when people basically have their houses taken away from there. During the boom, it was a little bit higher, but it's a pretty narrow range. In other countries, it can be very different. There are some countries that, even developed countries, the ownership rate is maybe 30 or 25%. Some other countries, ownership rate is 85, 90%. Talk about the United States, about 66%. Just to put it in perspective, it is higher than the percent of people that own things like stocks or bonds. Okay, so there are more people actually owning houses than people that own some kind of direct investment in financial markets. Not only that, the amount that they own in real estate and housing is usually a lot larger than what they do own if they own stocks. So for example, when we talk about numbers for ownership of stocks or bonds, is around 50 to 55% in the US. Again, number changes all the time, but somewhere in that magnitude, talking about more people own real estate. And if you think about how much people have in their investment account, you know, some people have 10,000 or 30,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, or the same people maybe have a $100,000 portfolio would have a $600,000 house. Okay, or the person have maybe 20,000 portfolio would live in a $250,000 house. So the exposure to real estate in almost 90, close to 100, something like 98% of the time is larger in real estate than anything else. It's only the very, very rich that have bigger wealth outside of their home. So yeah, the very wealthy maybe own a $2 million house and have investment portfolio of 5 million or 10 million. But for the mid-class, and the vast majority of times, it's not true. They would own a $600,000 house and a portfolio of 400,000 or something like that. So in most cases, this is not just bigger in terms of how many people participate, but also in terms of value. The next thing is size. So the overall size of the housing market, again, United States, roughly $25 trillion with a T, just housing. So if you take something about 100 million units and multiply it by about $250,000 per unit, which is roughly the numbers we're looking at, it takes to about $25 trillion. That is the number. Again, bigger than the stock market, bigger than the bond market. And if you're talking about the effect of that size, it's not just that you have so much money tied into real estate, it's the fact that it creates a lot of jobs, and it's the fact that it creates a lot of revenue for local and regional governments. So if you think about how, for example, the state of Florida are getting their taxes, okay, how do they do whatever it is they need to do? Pay for schools and roads and all those things. In the state of Florida, basically we have two sources, mostly. Two sources, other things, but most two sources. One of them is sales tax. Okay, everything you buy, some things exempt, you pay sales tax. And some will go to the state, some go to the county. And then you have property taxes. Property taxes is not everywhere, but in many cases can be the number one revenue generator, especially at the county level. Okay, so without real estate and the revenue generated in terms of taxes, we wouldn't be able to operate the things that we're operating. We would be able to have the roads and the infrastructure and policemen and firemen, all those things. This is being paid by taxes being levied on real estate. Okay, so think about in terms of the size and what this size means. Held as investment and consumption. It's probably the only widely tradable asset. There are other assets, but it's the one that's widely available, commonly held asset that people hold both as an investment and as a consumption good. If you think about almost anything else, it is either a consumption good or as an investment. So when people buy lunch, they don't buy because it's a good investment, they buy because they need to eat. Okay? And when people buy clothing or what else? They buy furniture, things like that. They don't buy because it's an investment. They buy it because they realize that, hey, I'm going to buy this table now because I need it. It's going to cost me $500. I'm not really planning to sell at any point. It's not an investment. Even if I sell it, I'm not going to make money with it mostly. It's a consumption. I buy because I need it. And it's worth for me that amount of money. Or the same thing with your clothing, whatever it is else. On the other hand, people buy, for example, things like stocks or bonds because they're investment. They don't use them. They can't live in their stock. They can't get much enjoyment from their stock. But they buy because they believe it is a good investment. They buy it for 80, hoping with some, based on their projections, that maybe it will return them, whatever, 10% a year, let's say. So they buy it for investment purposes. If you think about it, no other widely available asset is being used as an investment and consumption. People buy homes because they use it. Okay, they live there, they enjoy staying there, hopefully if they have a nice home, they raise their family there, so they use it as a consumption. They need a place to be, and they consider it in many cases, whether it is for good or bad reason, but they consider it as an investment. Okay, and when you have something that you consume and you also think about investment, people look at it differently. People try to find excuses why they want to buy more of it. Okay? If I tell you that diamonds is a wonderful investment, like, what? Great! Now I have a great reason to buy a lot of diamonds. Okay? Except that it's a terrible investment. If you want to buy diamond because you think they're pretty and they're worth the price, that's a different story, but it's not a good investment. Okay? When people think about something as an investment, also they have excuses to buy more of it, which is something of what propels the consumption of housing. It has very wide wealth effects. Okay, we talk about wealth effects and levered wealth effects. I'm always reading what I'm writing because I know you can't read, so I'm not even sure why I'm writing that. Okay, wealth effects and levered wealth effects. Because real estate is the biggest asset that most people own. It's the biggest component of their wealth. When real estate is doing well, people spend more money. And when people spend more money, the economy is doing better. So think about going back to 2004, and you bought a condo here in Brickell for $300,000, and a year later, the same condo was worth $380,000. Okay, so from 300 to 380, didn't do anything, it just went up in value because it was a crazy time, and your condo went up by $80,000. Okay, you feel richer. Whether you are richer or not, which we'll discuss later, it doesn't matter. You feel richer because you just now have a wealth of $80,000 higher than it was before, in addition to whatever else also was happening. And because you feel richer, you're more likely to buy things that otherwise you wouldn't. So you would go to this extra trip to Hawaii with family, or you would buy this newer car or a slightly nicer car, or you would go to an extra meal out, or whatever it is. You do things that you don't do when you don't feel richer. And when you do those things create jobs and propel the economy. On the other hand, if you're talking about 2009, when you just bought this condo for, in 2008, 9, you just bought this condo for $400, and then it's worth $200, you feel, first of all, like an idiot, but besides that, you feel poor, okay? And you don't go to this extra trip, you don't go to this extra meal, you don't take, you don't buy a nicer car, etc. You act in a very different way. And so the real estate, more than any other asset, has a direct effect on how people spend. When real estate goes up, they spend more. They borrow against it, or even they don't borrow against it. They just save less from their salary. Hey, I'm making so much money on housing, I don't need to save from my salary. Or maybe I don't need to save as much. That's the thinking. They spend more, So the economy is moving with real estate in a very big way. It doesn't move nearly as much when the stock market is doing well. And the reason, there's a lot of studies on that shows that, yes, when the stock market is going up, people do spend more, but not so much more. And the reason they don't spend so much more, first of all, because we don't have as much exposure. Most people don't have a big stock portfolio, so even if the stock market go up 20%, it doesn't affect them that much. And secondly, when the stock market is going up, a lot of people view it as a temporary thing. It's like, oh, it went up 20% this year, but who knows, maybe next year is going to go down 20%. When the house go up, again, whether it is for good reason or not, they view it as a more permanent thing. Until recently, until 2007, we never had, in modern history in the United States, we never had a time of correction in real estate in terms of the housing market as a whole in the U.S., in general, on average, never went down in nominal terms since we start tracking information. So at least since the 50s, since we have some reliable data, the housing market never really went down. So at least until 2007, people just felt, okay, it went up, then this is bank gain. From here, it can only either stay the same or go up. So when you have this feeling, you tend to spend more. Yes, you had a question?
I just had you said that people feel richer if the property increased in value, let's say 80,000. But if you're to sell that same property, and then buy a property within the same area,
that's why I said
you have to pay the same price. So it's an illusion of wealth.
Lecture 8. Lecture 8, we'll talk about that, okay? You shouldn't feel richer, but you do. What I'm talking about is not what should happen to the economy. I'm talking about what actually happened. People do feel richer, for wrong reason in my opinion, but they do feel richer in most cases, and they do spend more money. Those are the facts. I see your point 100%, we'll discuss it, but the reality is that people do feel richer and spend more money. Now we talk about this leveraged wealth effect. This leveraged wealth effect is even make this whole story just told you even bigger, because think about this person that bought this property for $300,000 did not pay $300,000 in cash for that. In many cases, they put 10, 20% down, and if you bought it in 2004, you probably put 0% down. So let's say that you put 10% down, so you put $30,000, and all of a sudden your investment went up by $80,000. So on $30,000, you made $80,000. That is more than 2.5 times doubling your money. You made a return of more than 350%. Okay? So anything that, any of those effects are being leveraged by the fact that people do not pay for real estate in cash in most cases. So any small changes appear very, very large compared to the wealth. Okay, so that is the lever effect. Related to borrowing constraints. We're talking about borrowing constraints. When people have real estate and that real estate going up in value, they can borrow against it, and they can borrow against it more money. Okay, usually the amount of money the bank would give you as a loan is dependent on how much your assets are worth. In the case of real estate, those are the cheapest loans out there, tax deductible, secured, just lower rates altogether. They're also regulated and all that. So the lowest possible. And again, when people have their houses go up, they can borrow more, and then they take this money, and the fact is that they buy with these other things. So they take the equity out of their house and they go spend it on other things that their salary would not allow them to afford. So even though they have a salary of $80,000 a year, they can still live on $120,000 a year for a while if the house is going up fast enough. Okay? They cannot do that forever, and that's how we get in trouble. But because it relaxes their borrowing constraint, it's really moving the economy one way or another in a very meaningful way.
Sorry, Dr. B.
Yes.
I didn't hear when you said that first. It says two borrowing constraints. I didn't catch that first part.
Related to borrowing constraints? Yes. So housing is related to borrowing constraints. So when housing worth more, you lay less constraint in terms of housing. In 2006, you can get into any bank and get a loan against your property because they just gave it to you, and your house value was more than it was 6 months ago, so no problem. and vice versa. And the last thing I'm going to mention here, and there's more, but just because we want to go through that quick, is simply people need house. And you just need a place to live. Okay, so if all those things together do not make housing important, I don't know what. However, taking all those things, housing, yes, you can call different things, I don't want to talk too much, is indeed very, very important to the economy and to people in general, the well-being, but that doesn't mean that housing will appreciate very fast. And I can show you the evidence that even though housing is so important, the rate of appreciation of housing is anemic, basically somewhere around 0% in real terms. By the way, we're going to ask you in the quiz, so how much do you think housing appreciated or is expected to appreciate in real terms in places like California or Omaha, Nebraska? You're way off. Now it's fine because I don't expect you to know the answer. That's why I'm asking those. But I'm asking those so you realize that even simple questions like that, and most of your real estate professionals, people do not know. Okay, so most people here and students I have in the past, they deal with real estate for a long time. And you ask them the most basic questions of, so how much do you think real estate is going to appreciate or have appreciated in the past? And almost none of them know. And if they know, it's usually by like they guess and happen to be right. And if you ask them why, they wouldn't know. But in most cases, they just do not know. So even though it's such an important asset class, people just have very little knowledge about how real estate works, why it's moved, why it's appreciating, why it's depreciating, what are fair assumptions, what are not. So that's what we're hearing in the classroom.
Give an actual answer to that question. You know how with the state, I know with the state of Florida, you can find out. I think it's through the property appraisers' recent sale prices. You know, if you take a reasonably comparable property, somewhat similar sales price appreciation, could you kind of use that to extrapolate that data?
We have a better way to do that. I will show also toward the end of the course, I'll show you resources to look at property appreciation. So for now, I'm just telling you this is what it is. Later I'll show you where you can find it, how it is constructed. It's constructed partially in a way that you described, slightly more sophisticated method, but yes, it's based on repeated transactions. So yes, you're in direction. I'll show you how to do it, not just for here, and not just for, but for any area in the United States that has reasonably deep level of transactions. Most people do believe, again, as fact, most people do believe that real estate is the best investment out there. And when I asked again this question in the quiz, most of you said yes, or almost yes. So it is the best. I strongly agree, or I agree. That was the answer for most of you. And surprisingly enough, the answers I get from students vary a lot with what just happened recently. So when I asked the same question in 2004, 5, 6, do you think real estate is the best investment out there? I would get 95% of the class say yes, strongly agree. I asked the same question in 2009, you'd get 50% of people to say yes. Then you ask the same question in 2011, then you go up to 60, and usually about 75% of people say that it is. So people have this very short memory. They look at what happened recently. It's just human nature. It's not because they're not smart. It's just human nature. People look at the recent history and extrapolate. So when housing or whatever it is, as it did very poorly recently, they assume it's a bad thing. And when things did very well recently, they think it is going to be good forever. Even if it's not the same magnitude, it's really changed the way they view that. So understanding why things do better or worse, again, it is very important. The reason people believe in real estate investment, and again, I just bring you a few points. People like something that they can touch and feel. You heard it from so many people. Stocks, in any case, they don't understand, they can't touch it, they don't like it. They like a building they can touch. I'm not sure what it is about touching, but they like to touch their property some way, okay? They can like to see it, they can go drive by it. Fun, okay? They like it. They always have an argument such that, oh, we don't create more land, so land must be the best investment out there. Well, I have news for you. There are a lot of things that we don't create anymore, like gold or diamonds. There's a finite amount of them on Earth, and that's it. Yet, that does not make them a great investment. Okay, so just because you don't make more of it doesn't mean that that by itself would make it a great investment. I'm not saying it's not, but that's not the reason. People, we talked about before, people like to believe what they want to believe. So because this is a consumption investment good, if people believe that it's a great investment, they have an excuse to buy a more fancy place to live. Right? Everybody want to have not everybody, but most people like to have a nice place to live in. And if they believe, it's a lot easier for me to convince you of something that you want to happen. And breaking somebody bad news or convince him that what you do and what you plan to do is all wrong, it's very difficult. But if you already have plans to do something and tell you this is a great idea, it's like, oh yeah, okay, you don't need to say more. I agree with you. People like to believe that it's a great investment, and that gives them an excuse to buy bigger houses that they can enjoy or show off or whatever it is they want to do with those houses. They overlook the importance of tax benefits. We'll talk about tax benefits later. But yes, if you buy housing or if you invest in real estate, you do get tax benefits, and people sometimes tend to overestimate. If you ask the average person about buying a house, they would say, I buy it because this, and that, and you get a tax credit, or basically you get a tax cut, you get to write it off. And when you ask them, so what is the benefit to you in terms of dollars? How many dollars a year do you save because you're, they don't know the answer. And for most people, it's a very small amount, except they don't know, because they're not accountants in most cases, except the accountants one. And even the accountants one, sometimes they overlook the fact that really all I save here is whatever's nominal amount. Helps, but it's not the reason. So people use it again as another excuse to buy housing. Of course, it's a great investment. People are talking about the cash flow it can generate. Yes, it is important. The fact that real estate is so important. So there's a lot of reasons why people believe it's a great investment, yet some of the evidence that show you in terms of appreciation, it is not such as people believe, at least not from the appreciation proportion side of the equation. So let's try to explain, after I give you all this argument, let's try to explain what caused this real estate appreciation we looked at, this about 0%. What are the factors behind it? So if we understand what made it 0%, or at least what made it 0% in the past, we have a better way of explaining why it will be or will not be something like that in the future. So let's talk about that. What explains real estate appreciation? And before that, I want to make sure that we're talking about the long term. So I'm not talking about what caused real estate to appreciate between today and next quarter or a year from now. That is different. We're talking about appreciation over time. 10, 20, 30 years, generation, 2 generations. We talk about long period of times. Now, I know that a lot of people here is like, I don't care what's going to happen over the next 30 years. I want to know what happened next year. Well, you need to realize that, first of all, you understand this long term, then on top of that, you can start with that, and on top of that, you can make shorter term predictions. If you have no clue where things are going long term, then you have nowhere to start. You start with this long term, and then you modify it to things that are happening right now and you see in the economy. Okay, so it's always start, even if you don't invest in long term, which you should, even if you don't invest long term, you should at least start long term as your starting point to make your assumptions. So we're talking about long term, and we're talking about national level. So things that are true for all housing in general, and again, you will alter that for your particular area later. So we always start from something that's general and then looking at the specific because it's a lot easier to do. We know what things, why things happen at the general level, and then we can look more specifically. It's much more difficult to do the other around. At least I don't know how to do that. So the things that explain real estate appreciation, of course, are the laws of supply and demand. Now, unlike your econ professor from undergrad or from your master's degree or whatever it is, I'm not going to sit here or stand there and draw some supply and demand curves. It has no usage, okay? I'm not going to write fancy equations about how to describe the marginal propensity to consume because this is irrelevant. We're talking about things that are practical. So even though I'm talking about econ terms like supply and demand, I really want to talk about the things that specifically in simple terms that everybody can understand and relate to what really affect housing prices. So let's start with the demand side. So the first thing you need to remember about real estate, which is different than other asset classes, is that the demand leads the supply. The demand comes first in most cases, and then the supply comes. So unlike other products, think about, so if I'm a designer of clothing, I don't know why I'm going back to clothing because it's the easier example. If I'm a designer of clothing, I'm going to design something that I think it's trendy and look good and people will like, so I'm first supplying this, and then people see it and it's like, oh, I like it, so I'm going to buy it. Okay, so basically you create something, people like to buy it. If you create an iPhone, it's like, okay, I'm going to create this thing that have this and this and that, have a sleek look, and it's going to be useful in so many ways, and then people see it, it's like, this is cool, I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to use it. Okay? In real estate, that's not how it works. This is not how it works. In real estate, you first have the demand, and then people supply it. Constructors or construction companies or developers will not come to Miami and say, we're just going to build a building here, and then people will see that it's so pretty they will buy. What they are doing is waiting for the demand to be created, at least the sophisticated ones. So the jobs are here, the money is here, people are requesting those things, and then they're going to buy it. Okay? Basically, then they're creating those. Sometimes it's like, okay, anticipation of we see where the economy is doing, so we're building it, so by the time they want it, we already have it. But you don't just build beautiful houses in a place middle of nowhere and wait people to go there and see, oh, those are beautiful houses. I'm just going to get them because they're so pretty. They don't have a job there maybe. They don't want to be there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much supply you create. If it's not in the right place at the right time, basically the demand is not there, people are not going to buy it. So first of all, it's the demand that leads the supply. It's something that is quite unique for real estate. It's not true for other assets. Now, if we're talking about demand, it's basically willingness and ability. Okay? How are we doing to bring it back? Thank you. So when people demand things, it's because they want those things, that's the willingness, but wanting things by itself is not enough, right? A lot of people want to drive a Ferrari, except they're unable to drive one, so they don't. Okay, so they need two things. They need to want something, that's the willingness, and they need to have the ability, meaning that they have to have some way paying for that, affording that. Without having those two, you're not going to have any demand for real estate. So basically, people have a lot of money, but you provide them for real estate in a place they don't want, or the quality they don't want, or the size they don't want, nobody's going to buy it. Other way around, if you have beautiful houses that people cannot afford, they're not going to buy it. So you need to have both of them. In terms of willingness, we're talking about basically people want certain amenities. When we talk about amenities, it's what is it that they get when they buy a particular real estate. So some of those amenities are natural, okay? So things that you cannot create. So for example, I want to be in a place where the weather is good, and I want to be in a place that is close to the ocean, or close to the mountain, or close to the lake, or whatever it is I like to do, or close to whatever my hobby. Okay, so in terms of things, those you cannot create. Okay, you cannot create an ocean. Lakes, I guess you can, but not in the magnitude that people really want to spend time on. Mountains, etc. Those are amenities. People are attracted to certain things. When people see those amenities, they have higher willingness. They are willing to buy more of it. They're willing to spend more of their income. Other amenities, of course, will be the amenities that we can create. So those are the things, for example, the physical amenities, like, okay, so I'm going to build houses or whatever it is with the right number of bedrooms, with the right ratio between bedrooms and bathrooms, with the right clubhouse in the neighborhood, with the right golf course next, whatever it is, those amenities we can create that are physical. And then you have the other kind, it's those amenities that we also can create but are not physical. So for example, we want to have a place that is safe to be. Okay, so you have police forces and low crime rates, fire houses close by, accessible, things like that. And other amenities that we appreciate, again, it doesn't come to the house, but it's related to the house, like school quality and air pollution and things like that. Okay, so you have to realize that all those things together, some that we do have control over and some we don't, they create the wilderness. And that's kind of makes sense. Now, in terms of, real estate agents like to talk about those up and coming areas. Have you ever heard a real estate agent talk about up and coming? Up and coming area meaning it's bad, but we think it's getting better. So that's a nice way of saying up and coming. But really all it is saying is that, look, you buy a place that right now doesn't have as many amenities, whether it is a higher crime rate or it doesn't have as many nice streets, or the amenities now are low. Okay, you buy it when it's low, and if our prediction or our sell pitch materializes, you're going to have more amenities later because crime rate is going to go down, the physical amenities around in terms of parks and things like that going to improve. They're not going to change the weather, they're not going to move the mountains, but they are hoping for other things to happen, and that will increase the willingness of people to pay, and that will increase the value of the property. So yes, you do have places that are going up in terms of their amenities because crime rate is going down, because pollution is going down, because school quality is going up, because there are more parks, because there are more shopping places or entertainment, whatever it is. Some of those moving this direction, and some of them are going the other around, right? I mean, we know that some places basically deteriorate over time. So yes, the willingness is changing over time. It's not something that happened overnight, but it's something that is definitely trending. So we know cities that, trending down, like Cleveland recently in the recent decades, and Detroit and places like that. And you have places that all of a sudden become more hip and desirable, like Denver and many other cities in Portland and Seattle, that's some of those West Coast areas that now considered to be more desirable. So it's, people change their tastes and willingness is changing over time, but it's not something that's changing over a day or a year. It's something that's trend that takes decades.
Is it a misrepresentation to see it as an undervalued area or undervalued property? I
don't know if it's, you see, people say so about the up and coming.
Right.
First of all, you need to realize about up and coming. I'm going to try and bring one of the people that were big forces of making Wynwood into what it is today.
Right.
That's a classic example of basically creating amenities out of nothing. But the thing is that if you say, okay, so I bought in Wynwood 10 years ago, and then today it's worth a lot more, it's true. First of all, you needed to see that. Secondly, you couldn't do it yourself. Right? It's not like, I bought in Wynwood, and then it went up. For those places, for the transformation to really happen over a decade, first of all, it's not a year, it's a decade, right? About a decade? For the transformation to happen over a decade, you need a lot of people with a lot of money that all of a sudden say, we're going to invest, not buy a house here and wait. We're going to be buying streets, full streets, street after street, basically the whole area, put a lot of money, wait. Then a decade later, if we do the right things, it's going to be worth a lot more. Now, if you think about the person, so you need basically a collective effort. It's not something that me and you individually, unless you have hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? You really need to be a multi-millionaire or billionaire to make those kind of changes. It's not people in my or your, I don't know what's your caliber, but
I'm not there at all.
You're not there. Okay. So it's not people like me and you that can do that. But even if you did, so people say, okay, so did I make great? You have to realize that you still live. You want to live in Wynwood 10 years ago? For the last 10 years? I'm still driving this some places there. It's like, oh my God. Actually, my wife's like, you should not drive your car in those places. No, but sometimes that's where navigation takes you. And it's like, I find myself a place where I really do not want to be. You really want to live there for 10 years? That is the price you pay for capturing this appreciation. Whether it's worth it for you or not, I don't know. So yeah, maybe if you're a single guy and you say, you know what, I'm just getting there, I'm locked myself in the house and I'm good. But if you're raising a family, you want to live there for the last 10 years to see this appreciation? So I don't know. And also, even if you're a landlord, you know, in many cases, for this time period, you either couldn't rent, or you rented to people that you didn't want to rent to and didn't pay you. So you might as well just not rent. So yes, of course there is this upside potential, but there is a price for that. And another thing, nobody really knew that that's going to happen, right? I mean, it turned out it's one of those success stories. For every success story, you have 10 other stories that are failing, right? I mean, we talk about all other areas, and I've been to places in Green North. We're going to revive downtown. The city is going to put this and give taxes, and then nothing happened. So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Go ahead, Philip.
You know any direct examples of that here in Miami?
Places that didn't succeed?
Yeah.
Well, Miami is the kind of place that, if you talk about recent history, there's so much demand here that's coming from Latin America that basically, if you wait long enough, you just did okay, and more than okay. And I think it's good because a lot of people made a lot of money. On the other hand, it also made a lot of people very naive about investment real estate because they see, okay, everything I touch just make a lot of money. So what can you teach me? I don't know anything that I need to know. You buy, you leverage, and you wait, and you're going to make a lot of money. Except that it's not going to last forever. We already see those trends are slowing in some areas. Some areas are overpriced. But when you have a place that have a lot of growth, then no, you're not going to have a lot of those failure places. So when you look at a success story like Miami, yeah, you're not going to have too many failures over long term. But in many other areas in the country, yes, you have a lot of those places. Try to revive them, and it just didn't happen.
But what about a lot of the? What are your opinions on the rumors of there being like a little mini bubble for like Brickell in particular?
You guys know how to get me out of topic, right? I have an index. I'm working part-time for his boss, creating different indices. And some of the indices I create is about the health of the market here in Miami-Dade and Broward, part of my consulting gigs. And I'll show you that later on. But yes, I think that in the high-end condos,
High-end
the high-end condos,
we're building.
my index shows, and I don't know, my index historically have about 75 to 80% accuracy. My index shows we are not doing well. If you're looking at the lower end, single family, so 300, 250, 300, 350, solid. And will continue to do so for many indicators I look at. So that is the short answer. Why? We don't have time for that right now. But that's my opinion.
I'm still off topic, just going back.
Okay?
To the point that you were making about up-and-coming areas, you think that up-and-coming areas are risky because, or just what was the point you were making? I'm sorry.
It's risky because it can take 50 years to become up and for it to be coming. You really have 50 years to wait. Okay? There's some places, people talk about up and coming, and you don't know which the next one. Is Little Haiti or Little whatever, or is it going to be? I mean, there's so many places going to be the next one. I mean, I have people in Israel, okay, where I grew up. There are people sitting on a piece of land for generations, for decades and decades and decades, and then one day they get in the mail, and now Israel is tiny. Israel is freaking tiny. I don't know how much you realize if you haven't been to Israel. You can fit Israel within Kansas 8 times.
It's like the size of New Jersey.
Okay, it's freaking tiny. And there is 7 million people, and there's 3 more people there, 4 times people live there compared to Kansas. So you said 7 times smaller, 4 times more people, that's make it 28 more. Okay? So land there is extremely valuable. People sit on land for decades, like grandfathers of my generation that bought a land for nothing. And the way you buy a land, you take a stone, you say, okay, we're going to pay you some price, and that price is from here until wherever I'm throwing the stone, and you bring with you somebody who can throw a stone really far, and that is where your land.
And that's all the
That is where your land ends. Okay, that's how they bought land. Okay, in the 1940s or even before Israel became a country. Some of those pieces of land, still in attractive places supposedly, are still worth nothing. You pay that taxes every year. You get a tax from the government saying you're going to pay property taxes, and you can't do anything with that except maybe grow cucumbers there because it's a farmer's land. Until one day you get in the mail that congratulations, or we'd like to inform you that from now on your land is available for urban development, and then your land is going from being worth basically nothing to be worth millions of dollars, depends how big your land is. So you become basically a millionaire overnight, but it can be that it's your grandson that became, okay? So there's a risk. Yeah, you didn't get to enjoy that. And some of those, okay, so if you bought it in the right place in Tel Aviv, then those places became very valuable, 20 or 30 years later. But if you bought in some of the areas around it, you may be waiting now 80 years and still nothing. So yes, there's more risk there.
I was going to say, just to Pedro's comment about saying that like maybe, like let's say Wynwood 10 years ago was undervalued. I think that's why you can't say it's undervalued, because the rest of the area was not really developed to its full potential today. So,
And that time it was.
And it has all these risks associated with that.
But also, too, wasn't your prior point the fact that like that area was less desirable from a residential standpoint, but a lot of the development that happened in Wynwood has been commercial, that has less volatility associated with it. I don't know.
What you say is right. I'm not sure how we make the case one way or another, but it's true. Guys, let's continue with that, because those conversations, I like them, but they can really get us off track. So I like to go off track a little bit because those conversations are important. But I do want to do the things that we need to do today too. So that is the willingness, okay? We're going up, down, something that's gradual, something you can change, something you cannot. Now, ability. Basically, with ability, you need to realize that people will only pay what they can pay. And I don't care how much you think your property is worth. If people are not willing to pay you that amount, it's not worth that. My property is worth $3 million. Well, put it in the market for a reasonable amount of time, see what you can get for that. If the best offer you got after being there for half a year is $2 million, then your property is not worth $3 million. Whether it is worth it for you or not, the value is only what people are willing to pay. Now, if you think about, willing and able to pay. Now, if you think about this ability is extremely closely related to how much money people make. Basically, ability and income are very, very, very closely related. Now, if you're thinking about income growth in the United States over the last 40 years, for example, again, I'm going over 40 years, but decades before were not very different. Of course, as we're becoming more mature, the development or the growth is slightly slower. But if you think about over the last 4 years, in terms of income growth in the United States, it is about 1% in real terms. Okay, so people making every year their salary going up by inflation, and about 1% on average every year. So people can improve their quality of life, which is what real returns are. They can improve the quality of life about 1% a year on average. Now, of course, people improve it more because at the same time that they have income and this 1%, they also have more skills. So you yourself do not see this 1% because you also get more education and you have more knowledge and you have more experience in your job. So your increase may be higher. But overall for the economy, okay, the same percent was you a year ago, basically getting a 1% increase. Take 1% increase over a generation. Okay, that's, let's say, 35 years. We know that it's more than just 1 times 35. It's accumulated, let's say, 50%, whatever that number is. You can live better than the generation before you, right? So we all know that on average we live better than our parents. And on average our parents live better than our great-parents. And the same thing for the generation before that. So every generation is living slightly better than the generation before that because they're more productive. Okay, we do things in a more productive way. We have computers, we have machinery, we develop things that make us more productive. We work smarter, whatever that is, basically 1% a year in real terms. I have some graphs for you to show you that. If you look at your blackboard, if you still go under lecture 1, even though we are at lecture 2 now. I believe it's that one, performance, real estate, and trends. Okay, so we saw this graph. This is, for example, this is not 40 years, it's about 30 years of income growth in California and in Kansas, over 30 years in real terms. In California, income growth is about 0. It was 100, and 30 years later, it's still 100. Whatever that index is, it's the same. The decade before that, we actually got quite a lot of income growth, so on average, we're getting about 1%. But basically, income growth is not something that you can expect people to earn 3, 4, 5% more every year in real terms. It just never happened. Now, in some developing countries, so if you go to places, some places in Latin America, some places in Asia, some places in Africa, you do see that those economies are growing a lot faster. And in some of those places, you would see maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe % a year of growth because they have so much to catch up to the rest of the world. But once the economy, talking about economies like the United States or developed Europe, 1%, it's basically what historically you can expect and what you should be expecting from economies to grow in terms of personal income year after year. Now, if you only make 1% more per year, or the average economy, how can you afford housing that is 5% more expensive every year? You can't. Okay? Basically, what it means, if you make 1% more, but housing go up at 5%, something has to give. Okay, so you can do it for a year. So I'll buy less, whatever, groceries. So I'll go movies less, and then the next year, and the next year, and the next year. You cannot have something going up at 5% for a long period of time if you only make, or the whole economy is only making 1% more a year. It just cannot happen. Okay, so in terms of this affordability of people simply not making 8% more a year in real terms, therefore they cannot spend 8% more on housing every year. And remember, it's not about, well, but that's what housing is worth. The only worth what people can pay. If people don't have the money, it will not be worth that. Okay, the two are extremely tight. In this case, so California is about 0, Kansas, in this case, about negative 10% over 30 years, which is about negative 0.25%, somewhere around 0 over this time period, because we have the Great Recession, we have a few things that affect that in a negative way. But in terms of even affordability, it's not very different in different places across the country. So just because people live in California doesn't mean that their income is going up faster. It's just not. At some point, if it costs me $200,000 to hire an engineer in California, but I can attract the same engineer in Florida for $100,000, I'll just pay them $120 and bring them to Florida, and they can live better. Okay? Or I can hire the same engineer for $50 in Ohio. I'll pay them $100, which is a wonderful salary, and they will come live in Ohio and then go visit in California, because at some point you're not going to be opening your company, all your companies of particular type in Silicon Valley, because financially it doesn't make sense. Okay, so yeah, for a while there's some concentration of industries. After a while, when it becomes too expensive, competition gets into the way, and then you spread to other places. So if you think about even my profession, my income is unrelated to where I work. So when I got out of college in 2007, I had a few offers from different colleges and from some industries in New York City. Paid a lot of money, was tempting, and I said, thank you, but no thank you. I'm not going to New York City. And then, I went to look at universities. For example, I had an offer from San Jose State University, basically in the San Francisco area. And San Jose State University, all those offers back then, if you're starting, assistant professor, no experience, just got your PhD and some common sense, you basically start at 120,000, 115 back then. That's about the salary they offer, I don't remember, but let's say 115 or so they offer in San Jose. And they were talking to me in San Jose about, well, you know, we have subsidized housing, and you have kids? Are you married? Oh, you don't have kids? Okay, so you know what, if we can get you a studio apartment on campus, and it's subsidized, you can live there for 3 years. And I was like, I was a student? I'm not a student anymore. I don't want to live like a student. This is not that's not why I studied so hard to get a PhD, so I can live in a studio apartment on campus like the rest of the students, which was fun when I was a student, but at some point it's like, enough is enough. But that is what they're offering. The same offer basically from other universities, the one that I accepted at East Carolina University, I could buy a beautiful house, 5 bedrooms, brand new, yard, whatever you want, and go out to dinners and have a great lifestyle. You can do that on 120,000 plus. Yeah, I had to invest in other things, but even without that, on 120,000, you can live very well in a place like that. So at some point, people make decisions of, yeah, San Jose is nice, but if I really like, I'll just live in North Carolina and travel there twice a year. Stay at a, whatever, fancy hotel, a lot cheaper. At some point, when things become too expensive, people make those decisions. So affordability, in this case, income growth is a key. To show you something else about affordability, if we're looking at this particular spreadsheet, that is the price to income per capita table. You know, before I even show you that, I'll show you some of the other slides here. This is the U.S. housing price to median household income, okay, in the United States, all the way from 83 till basically the end of last year. So for example, when you see the number 3, what it means is that on average, a household, which is family, whether it's a couple or a single person if they live by themselves, or a family with kids if they're a household, make 3 times as much as a house is worth. Okay, so for example, if the average house is 100,000, sorry, let's say the average median household income is 100,000, the house in this case is worth 300,000. The ratio is 3 to 1. And when the ratio is 2.5, it means that people making 50, then the price of houses are 2.5 times, let's say 125. Okay? Now this is very common ratio people use in order to gauge how expensive housing are, because it doesn't just tell you how much housing go up, it tells you how much housing go up relative to what people can afford, what people already make. If housing go up a lot and people make a lot more money, it doesn't really matter. The problem is when housing go up a lot, but people do not make a lot of money. So basically what happened is that for quite a lot of time, it was somewhere between 2.6, 2.8. And then in the 2000, it started shutting up all the way to about 4. And then we have the collapse, basically all the way to around 2, and now it's somewhere around 3.5. Okay? The reason it is still high is the reason we're going to talk about later, but basically at some point when things become too high relative to income, people stop buying it because they can't afford it. Okay? They buy other things, they buy less of it, they start renting, they just cannot afford it anymore. This is in Massachusetts, basically Boston. I know probably people in Massachusetts probably say that, no, that's not all that there's there, but that is the biggest market there. And, you know, Massachusetts is considered to be a more desirable place on average by people, and therefore the willingness there is higher, so people are paying slightly more, so it's not between 2.8 and 4, it can go all the way to 6, and right now we're on 5. But again, the idea is that it's going to some level, when it becomes too expensive, it has to come down. Look at places like California, okay? So California, for many years, was anywhere between 3, 4, 5 or so. And then in 2007, 2006, it basically reached 9. Almost a little bit more than 9. Those are the places where, you know, one of the biggest levels happened. So when people ask me about did you know that there was a bubble in real estate? All I need to do, the answer is that yes, I knew. And it's not because I'm that smart. It's because you can look at just a few keys, one of them is this, to realize that housing were never as high as 5.5. And all of a sudden they're at 9. Now I didn't know that they're going to burst today. But when they go into 7 or 8, there's no question they're going to go back to reality. Whether it's going to go this year or the year after that or another quarter, that is the whole idea about bubble, right? And you don't know how far it can expand before it bursts. But you know it's going to burst when it's overinflating, okay? So yes, people looking inside those things can look at those things and say, yes, this was a bubble, we expect to go down. So I sold off my real estate, for example, around 2005. Now people were laughing at me because in 2006 was a great year. In 2007 was a great year. Oh, and you're a real estate professor, you sold your stuff in 2005. It's like, yes, I didn't know that the next 2 years is going to be that great, but I did know that eventually it's going to collapse, and I end up being right on that. I don't make all my decisions right, but this is one of those obvious things. So if you just look at things like this and you combine it with other factors, which we'll talk about, it's not hard to see that there was a bubble. Looking at just prices by themselves doesn't tell you much. Looking at prices relative to that affordability factor is very important. Hawaii, same story. Oh, Hawaii is beautiful. Well, again, at some point, you can't afford it. Who's buying Hawaii? Well, this index is a little bit mixed. If you think about it, there's a lot of people that don't earn their income in Hawaii, that buy in Hawaii. All those beautiful houses in Hawaii. It's not people that work on the island that buy those houses. It's people that live in LA, make a lot of money, and decide to buy a house in Hawaii. Or people in Australia or Japan, those are the big buyers. Okay, but still, at some point it's like, yeah, Hawaii is beautiful, but when it gets to some price, maybe I'll just buy somewhere else, or maybe I'll just go there on vacation, and so it just doesn't make sense at some point. Nevada, we know that's one of the, again, basically when we had the bubble and collapse, it concentrated in Nevada, Las Vegas mainly. Again, people in Nevada, we know Nevada, which is Las Vegas mainly, Arizona, Florida, South Florida mainly, and California. And one more market, Detroit or Michigan, but that's for different reasons. That's basically the collapse of the auto industry and things like that. But the other four was basically because prices went out of whack. So if you think about Nevada, in Nevada, the boom and the collapse was even more severe than anywhere else, Nevada and Arizona. And the reason it was more severe than anywhere else is because if you think about those places, you have as much land as you want. Have you guys ever been to as much freaking land as you want? So what happened when the demand comes, right? Remember, demand comes first. Then you start building them, except you don't build one at a time because it's not efficient. You build this neighborhood or those buildings and they all come at once, each one of them hundreds and hundreds of units, and then the music stops. You have all this inventory that is basically there, like, oh, we thought the demand is here, except it wasn't, we're building it, and then it's not, and then you have the collapse. In this case, think about it, from place that was always valued at 3.5, all of a sudden going twice as much relative to income, and land there is not an issue. It basically went from 6 or 5.5 all the way to 2.5. That is on average. So on average, things drop there by 50%. That means that some properties drop at 70, 80%. Okay? When that is the biggest thing you have, and it's levered, it's tough. But if you're listening to things that you should be listening, you should not be there to begin with.
That's what's happening here on Brickell.
You
said that.
To a lesser extent, but yes, and there is other factors to talk about in the international. Miami is an area that exports real estate. We'll talk about that. Florida, right? You want to see Florida? Same thing. We know what happened here. Again, things are, and yes, Florida is not just Miami, but South Florida is a big part of the Florida housing market. And yes, when things are going between 2.5 and 3, and all of a sudden they're at twice as much, it doesn't make sense. Okay? They have to return, and in all those cases, to basically return to where they were historically, and then to continue to go up. And that continuation to go up, the reason that all those graphs are actually higher than average today, and we're still on average not in a bubble, at least in my opinion, I love the data I look at. On average, I'm not saying there's some areas like condos and luxury condos in Brickell that we have oversupply of. But on average, we're not a bubble. The reason that we are on the higher end is because of the next item I want to talk about, and that is so the first one was basically income, and the second one, interest rate. Okay, so with interest rates, right now we're basically at a time where interest rates are as low as they ever been. And I'm not saying necessarily today, but this quarter or this year, basically interest rate is the lowest it's been. I just got a mortgage on my house, 3%, actually 2 7/8%. Okay, 15-year mortgage on my house. I could pay for my house in cash. It just doesn't make any freaking sense to pay in cash when you can borrow for 2.875 and you can declare it on your taxes, where at the same time I believe that I can make probably, I don't know what the number is, but it's bigger than 2.875% on my investments. Okay, whether it's 8 or whether it's 10 or whether it's 12, I don't know, but it's bigger than 2.8 long term. It doesn't make sense for me not to take a mortgage. So the fact that you have lower interest rates make it that people with the same amount of money can pay more for houses. So even though they still have, let's say, $50,000, usually they can only buy a house that is 3 times as much, $150,000 house. Now maybe they can buy 4 times as much. Instead of $150,000, they can buy $200,000, simply because the payments on the mortgage are lower for the same amount that they borrow. Okay? The problem with that is that, yes, people can borrow more for cheaper, so they can spend more money on housing, even though their income did not change. The problem with that is that interest can only go down so much. And I know people talk about, well, at this point they're going to start going up, and they haven't yet, except they're kind of starting. Okay, we're talking about different signs, and it's not going to happen very fast. I don't think so, but it's going to happen. When interest rates in the 1980s were at 17, 18%, if you got a mortgage, if your parents got a mortgage on a house in 1982 and they got a 7.5%, it's like, you got a good rate. 17.5%? Where'd you get that? Out of that book. That is a good rate. Now, when you go from 17.5, I know it's not straight line, but basically interest rates were declining, not straight line, but trending down all the way that you can get mortgages for 2.5, 3, 4%, depends on the length, credit, etc. That means that even if you didn't make more money, you can buy a lot more house. Okay? So don't let it fool you. The fact that people could buy a lot more housing in the last 3 decades is not going to repeat in the next 3 decades. Because when interest go from 17 to 3, that's a big wind in your back. People can buy a lot more housing, a lot more ability, making houses going up. They still didn't go up very fast, remember? Only 3%, but a lot faster than they would otherwise. Now, from this point on, they're not going to go another 14% down. They're not going to go from 3 to negative 11. It's not going to happen, right? The lowest they can go is 0, and they're not going to go there either. So basically, the option you stay with is that it's going to stay where it is, or it's going to go up, which is probably the most likely scenario. When it's going up, then even as you make more money, you still can buy less house. So every increase in salary you're going to get, it's going to be offset by the fact that you need to pay more for your mortgage. So you're not going to have this wind in your back in the next 30 years. It's maybe not going to be in your face, but it's definitely not going to be in your back. Interests are not going down. Surprise, interests are not going down significantly from this point on. 3%, maybe they're going to go to 1%. I don't know. I don't think so. Let's say they're not going to go, there's only so much you can go down. Most likely stay the same, go up. And think about it. So when people talk about real estate, oh, it's a great time to buy because interest rates are low. Another way to think about it is that interest rates are low, it means they're going up. And when interest rates are going up, it means people can buy less housing, and people can pay less for your house, and if they pay less for your house is worth less. So I'm not saying it's a bad time, I'm just saying those are the kind of things that you can think about as a counter-argument for take advantage of low interest rates. That's kind of the real estate agent's pitch. The other side is be aware of interest rates going up, which would put a face wind, basically a headwind to your investment.
So, what is the relation between interest rates and inflation in terms of, I was reading that when interest rates are this low and for a long period of time, that it'll affect inflation, making it,
And then,
go
yes,
higher.
yes, and then interest rate will follow. Because you cannot have real negative interest rates for a long period of time. Yeah, so there is positive relation between the two. One is leading the other. In this case, when you created so much easy money for a while, you're creating, if this money is spent, you're creating some inflation. So the point of interest rate, yes, they're propelling real estate prices forward because they're making more ability, except that it's going both ways. Once it's go forward, then at some point it has to go back. Going back to income, since we're talking about this, just to show you, this is a table that I created for one of the papers that I wrote about the price to income ratio in different states in the United States. So, for example, when you see here Alabama at 3.9 on average, it means that the average price to income was 3.9 over the time period that I studied there, which was the 80s through earlier this decade. Okay? It was as low as 3.3, it was as high as 5, some standard deviation which tell you how much it deviates from that average, not between points. And then you have some R-square percentage. Now this R-square percentage, without getting into regression analysis, we'll talk about it in another class, basically explain, it's basically a number that tell you how much your income explains housing prices. And if you look at those numbers, they're basically in the 90s for almost all of them. We can talk about some of the exceptions, except I don't have much time to talk about those exceptions right now. If you're looking at the United States as a whole, basically 95%, which means that 95% of the long-term fluctuation in pricing is coming from income growth. If there's no income growth, there's no housing appreciation. If it goes down, same thing, and vice versa. 95% of the story is income. So when you have income growth at 1%, 0%, 0.5%, 1.5%, do not expect real estate to go up at 5, 6, 7, 8% a year. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen long term.
Professor,
Yes.
is there a delay between each factor?
Yes, and sometimes one is leading the other. Unlike other things, here I can tell you one happened first and the other one always happens second. Sometimes one is leading the other, and sometimes the other is leading the one.
Okay.
So yes, they don't necessarily happen at the same time, because if you think about the way people act, when things do well, when things go well at work, then they don't buy immediately.
Okay.
But then they do buy, and then that propels the economy more. So there's some delay. The direction of what caused the other is not always that clear.
Okay, there's correlation but no causation.
Well, there is causation there, except that I can't really tell you. The causation is going both ways.
Okay.
So housing, remember, because you have more income, you increase the price of housing, and because housing is doing well, people spend more, and then you're going to have more income. So both of them affect, and that's why it's not necessarily one cause the other. It's both of them causing each other.
Okay.
Good question. But anyway, so that's, if that's not evidence that it's basically all about income long term, I don't know what it is. So do not expect prices at 8, 9, 10% like you have on your quizzes. Expect things like 0, 1, half, 1.5, negative half. That is where I don't know exactly where they are. I can't tell you it's going to be 0.7%. I just know that it's that somewhere in that magnitude. It's not 8. It's not negative 8. It's somewhere around this 0 to 1% in developed country over long term in real terms. Okay? Other factors that affect credit, credit availability. Again, I apologize for my handwriting. First of all, I have bad handwriting, I admit. And second, it's tough to write on this. It really is. It's tough to write on this credit. That's why I read it. Credit availability. If you think about it, at different times, banks or lenders are more or less willing to give you money. Just like interest rates, these things go one direction and then goes back to a different direction. So think about it. In 2006, if you want to get a loan, the joke was that if you can make fog in the mirror, you can get a loan, right? My name is, okay, you approved. It was really that easy. Oh, how much money do you want? Well, you have to say here that you make that much money, and then we're gonna approve you for that, okay? And your house is 300,000. So how much down payment? Oh, you don't want to put down payment? That's fine. And by the way, we have closing costs and all that. So we're going to lend you 310, but oh, you forgot. We also want to furnish your house because, of course, you have money. So we're just going to lend you 340 for a house that is appraised at 300, which even the appraised value is a lie because it's really worth 250, but the appraised would be fire if they would say that it's 250 or they would not be. Oh, we know what happened here, right? We'll talk about it more later. But the idea is that credit was very available. So if you think about it, when you talk about credit availability so high in 2006, what are you doing to this ability? Everybody and their dog is able to buy a house.
Yes.
Because down payment is not necessary, so you don't need to have any money. A job is not necessary, just saying that you have a job. You can just, everybody can, so when you have these periods, that everybody, of course, and willingness there, because it's always something beautiful, it's like, I want this. Can I afford it? Of course. Here is the way. So you have the willingness and ability, but it only goes so far because after a while people realize that, okay, people buying things that they cannot afford, they lie on their mortgage application, and then things swing the other way around. It swings so far the other way around that in 2009, go try get a loan. You can't do it. I bought a house in 2011. Okay? And I went to get a loan because rates were low. And even 2011, now, you show, first of all, I show I can buy this house in cash. Okay? You show I have a state, very secure job from the government that says, here's how much money I'm going to make, way above all those ratio that they want. No perfect credit, whatever it is. And it took, it was a nightmare to get a loan for some of the most qualified people in 2011. So basically, if it was very tough for me to get a loan in 2011, you can imagine a person with not so much of a stable job, person with not down payment, people with no asset. You can't. So all of a sudden, you swing from everybody can have it to nobody can have it. And then, of course, okay, so we went too far, and then they're relaxing a little bit. But the idea here is that, again, it's not something that will consistently increase the ability of people to buy. Sometimes it increases it, sometimes decrease it. On average, over a long period of time, you should expect some average credit availability that's available to some good borrowers, not necessarily excellent, but some good borrowers should be able to borrow. And it's not really a push or a pull on prices. So those two, may have some long-term implication. Rates go up, rates go down, it gives some more or less ability. Credit is more or less available, make people more or less able to afford houses. But the one that is really trending over time is the income. And this number is, like we said, somewhere in the magnitude of 0 to 1% in developed countries like the US. If you're sitting now in Guatemala or you look at higher numbers, maybe 2, maybe 3%. Okay, it's not 8, but it's higher.
Can we have a break?
Now, I'm sorry?
Sorry, can we have a break?
Yes, you can have a break, but let me just cover one more thing on the. Thank you, Sabrina. Actually, I did not designate you today, but you did your job anyways.
That wasn't my idea.
Okay, you earn your job back. So next time, thank you. I just want to finish on the demand side. So we have on one hand, we have the willingness and ability, and pushing up is basically the income. On the other hand, you have something that pushed down. Okay, so I push up about, let's say, 1% on income. They have push down. What is the push down on this willingness and ability? The push down, or the negative force, is the fact that housing depreciate every year in terms of their functionality and their obsolescence. Basically, the fact that they are just becoming older. Okay, so look at houses house today versus a house that is 10 years old, the pipes are older. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're older. The carpeting or flooring are older. The faucets, the roof, everything is a little bit older, so it's worth a little bit less. It's slightly less attractive. You're slightly less willing to buy it compared to something that is brand new. Also, if you think about more long term, the way that they build things 10, 20, 30 years ago, so as things go through time, they build them differently, not so much according to the taste of people today. So forget about the color of the carpeting or the color of your granite or things like that. That's of course changed over time. So even if it's a perfectly good granite, but it was picked 10 years ago, it's like, yeah, it's nice, but it's not what I would pick today. Okay, it is less attractive. You're less willing to buy this property. Okay, because it's not whatever you pick today. If you think about the way people build in terms of the way they construct the house, it was very common if you bought a house in the 1970s to have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house with a huge living room and no closets or very little closets.
For a gable, no clothes.
Okay, that's how they built before. I mean, the 20, a big living room, sometimes two living rooms. Okay, huge. That's where the family sits. 3-4 bedrooms, 1 bath, no walk-in closets. Now, it doesn't mean if you build the same thing today, it maybe costs a lot of money to build it, but it's not what people want. You'd say, okay, I want the same space, but make the living room a little bit smaller. Most people. Now, of course, taste is different, but if you talk about the average, you say, I want the living room to be a little bit smaller, but give me 1 or 2 more bathrooms, make the bedrooms a little bit smaller, and give me walk-in closets, make the hallways maybe a little bit, whatever that is, make the more open flow through the house, whatever it is, even if it's the same space, it becomes less functional over time. So the fact that your house become less functional and older in terms of this, simply the materials that deteriorate over time, that is decreases the value of the house. Okay, comparing house that is brand new versus one that is 10 years old. Most people like to talk about their the house have, again, realtor talk. It's a charming old house. Basically it means it needs a lot of work, right? Charming is one of those words that needs some work, okay? It needs some love. But basically those houses depreciate over time in terms of their functionality and in terms of the material from which they're built, and they need repairs and updating. How much those numbers are? Again, research shows that those numbers are somewhere around 0.5% to 1% per year. That is the rate of depreciation on housing for those two factors. If you're taking 1% up in terms of income, and you subtract from that about 0.5% to 1% down because of this functionality and older materials, basically depreciation, you're getting to 0. So the math here, I know it's not, I didn't put 10 equations here on the board, but it's hopefully with language that makes sense. It's why you should expect about 0% appreciation long term in real terms. It doesn't mean that pricing houses would not go up. They would go up in nominal terms, but in real terms, over long term, you should be expecting something around 0%. Okay, let's continue after the break. Here's my suggestion, guys. So, because we don't have dinners together, because of these new rules they have, not just here at FAU, but everywhere, each one of you either you bring your food or you go somewhere to get it. I recommend, so just so you have some social time, there's a dining room on the second floor of the other tower. If you want to follow me now, I'll show where it is.